Last night, the AP released a draft memo from the Department of Homeland Security that would have, amongst other things, sent 100,000 members of the National Guard to 11 U.S. states to round up and deport undocumented immigrants. Dated January 25th, the draft memo says participating troops would be authorized to perform the functions of an immigration officer in relation to the investigation, apprehension, and detention of aliens in the United States. 4 states that border on Mexico are included in the proposal. That's California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. But it also encompasses Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Now, we've had previous cases where the National Guard has been involved in immigration-related issues on border states sometimes, but this would be an expansion to states that typically do not see this sort of behavior, and certainly not on the scale that this would have encompassed. And by the way, in terms of the stakes here, nearly 1/2 of the 11.1 million people residing in the U.S. without authorization live in those 11 states, according to Pew Research Center. Now, this was released late yesterday afternoon. The White House responded. Sean Spicer says the AP report was 100% not true and irresponsible, saying there is no effort at all to utilize the National Guard to round up unauthorized immigrants. So that's sort of accurate. We found out later that law enforcement officials said the memo referenced by the AP was a very early pre-decisional draft that never made it to the head of the Department of Homeland Security. So it's not accurate to say that it's 100% not true. They're reporting on a draft memo. It just apparently did not get very far along the decision chain.
Yeah, no, the memo is 100% real, and they acknowledge that it was real.
Yeah.
To what degree it was set to take effect is a very, very fair point and interesting
It is
question.
a leak and fake news at the same time.
I really wish the media would be more clear about what a draft memo is, though. It's not policy that's going to be imminently be implemented. So rather than stoking hysteria and framing it in such a way as if, the National Guard is about to deploy and round people up, I just wish that they were a little more circumspect, the AP was, when it was initially reported, because they first put out a tweet this morning that said the Trump administration is considering up to 100,000 troops being deployed across these several states. That's just not really an accurate reflection of what stage in the policy-making process this was at. So
it would be more accurate to say that they were considering at one point something along these lines, or some variation on this report.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think Michael's right, because then the backlash is, well, they would never do anything like that. While the fact is, somebody at a relatively senior position thought it was a good idea to draft this memo, which kind of gives you an insight into the culture and what they're willing to consider there, which is worth noting. But yeah, they were never going to do it. So the end result is it's worse, for me, worse than if they never leaked the story at all.
Well, so I have a mixed opinion on that.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that it's real in that somebody drafted this memo, and hence it would be considered. It's not real in the sense that Donald Trump already said yes, because he didn't, right? So that's a very, very important distinction. I would certainly report on it, but I would report on it with clarity, as Michael's asking. I certainly wouldn't hold the story. It's a very interesting story. Now, what I'm worried about is that it's going to give them ideas, because I actually think that if they did this, it would have 2 ramifications. One is that we could begin a civil war. I'm overstating it, obviously, it's hyperbole, but because people would fight back, and they would get very, very animated on this issue, understandably so, as people are being rounded up. On the other hand, I think that it would be very popular with the right, and I think probably with a lot of independents. And so now I'm worried it's out there, and they're going to go, wait, that might actually poll well, so maybe we should give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, among his folks...
Oh, no, they would love this.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking alt-right. I think that a lot of people will be like, hey, there's somebody finally doing something about immigration. So be careful, how we proceed here, because it could accidentally turn real.
Well, I think that Trump should be careful how he proceeds if he does something like this, because can you imagine how much the conspiracy theory wing on YouTube, the Alex Joneses, are going to fight back when they find out the National Guard is going to be invading U.S. states? They're going to go crazy. Probably not. So it's both true to say that they're obviously they didn't proceed on this as far as we know right now, but we also can't say that they would never do this. We know that another executive order having to do with immigration is coming out within the next week. And also think about how some of these issues have been discussed in the past. Throughout the campaign, Trump said that he wants to deport millions of people, possibly more than 10 million. He's talked previously about setting up a deportation force to go into U.S. states and cities and do those deportations. He talked recently about sending the feds into Chicago to deal with their problems. So the idea that he would send these National Guard troops around the U.S. is hardly without precedent from his own quotes.
And let's remember how this frog boiled in the first place. In the mid-2000s, George W. Bush twice deployed the Guard to the border. And before it was, the National Guard was for natural or man-made disasters, military protection of the population, or critical infrastructure. So Bush expanded it to, well, maybe they should go down on the border. And then Obama extended the federal local partnership program that dealt with this issue. Now, to be fair to the Obama administration, they then changed their mind and thought it was leading to racial profiling and walked that back. But two different administrations had begun to get on that road. Now, this draft memo is different. It's not just for the border. It's states that are nowhere near the border, like Oregon. It's much broader. And it has the problem of it authorizes these troops to act like law enforcement and, by the way, to ask for papers. And then that's where the left would fight back a lot, because all of a sudden that feels a little like East Germany.
Yeah.
And National Guards are principally state-based entities. So the governors are actually the commanders-in-chiefs of the National Guard in their respective states. So in order for them to become a truly federal force, Trump would have to issue some kind of directive to supersede governors in states like Oregon, where you can't really imagine the governor consenting to this kind of deportation force idea.
Yeah, and so I read through the actual draft memo, and in the version that we have, it did require the governors to consent to this. So at least they were considering that. He didn't apparently just think that he could order them all over by himself. But while this is like the headline version of the memo had multiple facets to it, including comprehensive views of all border security over the past few decades, hiring up 5,000 more Border Patrol agents, and also doing a comprehensive review of any actions by states that has the direct or indirect effect of providing funding to the government of Mexico. And so they wanted to do a review of that, which is interesting as well. It also, by the way, included funding for a wall on the border. So this was not just this border, the National Guard. This was a comprehensive set of policies.
And in one of the articles, they said that these National Guard troops would not yet be federalized. It was like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. Now, again, that's not necessarily in the memo, et cetera, but hey, Bush sent them to the border, and here we are now discussing the possibility that they're beyond the border, and I'm just worried that the temperature in this pot is getting a little hot for us frogs. Support independent media and get the whole Young Turks 2-hour show and other network shows all ad-free, tytnetwork.com/join. Come join us today.